Back of this book, James Deal. I knew that he was ideal for the, no pun intended. Hi, Robert. Would you like to have a... And we got one.
We told Mike the publisher isn't here yet, so he said you couldn't start it, so he's still drinking.
Oh, Mike's still drinking. Okay, well that's fine. We can say all we want. I taught Canadian Studies for 25 years at Humber College, and the first year I started was 1986. I finished last year. I'm still teaching at Humber, but it's a different course. And the first thing I did was Milton Acorn, and this was just before Milton Acorn died. It was the year he died, in fact. So that's 25 years ago. And we'd hoped to have this new edition of the Milton Acorn selected out for last year, but one or two things got in the way. So we got it out for the 50th anniversary of the free speech movement in Allen Gardens, where I first heard of Milton Acorn. Not particularly as a poet, but just as a public figure, because that's when he kind of hit the big time in the media across Canada. And that was the free speech movement 50 years ago. So we've got a quarter century, and Milton's death last year, quarter century, and a half century from when he first became well known to the public. And that's what we're celebrating here tonight. I used to read to my classes, always, to my Canadian Studies classes, and it wasn't just literature. I used this, because I wasn't teaching simply literature, I used this as an entree into Canada, what Canada's all about. I've tasted my blood. And I'd often use I Shout Love as well, because that was the poem, as you know, that he used at Allen Gardens and wrote more than once, rewrote. And I still read I've Tasted My Blood to my Chinese students. I've been teaching Chinese students now for the last 15 years. So I don't think you want to hear me do that again, because I'm always doing it. At a drop of a hat, I'll do I've Tasted My Blood. But I think there's a more appropriate poem that I'd like to introduce this session with, and it's in the book. It's more appropriate because I think it gives a much wider context, as this edition of Milt's work does, to his work, to show him as something more than just someone who was protesting against the issues of the day, which he obviously was, someone who was just a romantic poet, which he was, in the classical sense, capital R, and all of the other things that we can identify in Milton. He also had a theory of history. Now, that's something that's fallen out of discussion amongst people when they talk about politics today. The various ideologies have a hard time of it. People such as in the Occupy movement, who are clearly concerned with ethics, ethical questions, don't seem to go too much further than just making a sort of presence. They make themselves present. But we want to speak about it. People want to speak about this. They want to be able to speak. So I'm thinking in my mind now, going back to the free speech movement of the early 60s, which incidentally, in Toronto, with Milton Acorn and Joe Rosenblatt, preceded by 2 years the more famous Berkeley free speech movement in the United States. So we went up on them there. And this is the poem from the same period as I've Tasted My Blood, which appeared in Jawbreakers, published by Raymond Souster, Contact Press, in his basement, and I believe you saw him this afternoon. How's Ray? Ray's great, and he knows we're here. So Ray is from that generation, and he knows we're doing this, and I know he's very pleased about it. He wished he could be here. But this is the poem from that same collection, Jawbreakers, as I've Tasted My Blood, which was 1963, published by Ray Souster. In his basement, as I said. It had been turned down by the Canada Council, and Ray said, well, let's just go ahead and do it ourselves. So he had some other more choice words that I won't use. So he did, and this is one of the poems he published. And this is the poem I take to be the, if you like, the epigraph for the Speak movement, because the Speak movement is being kicked off here, if you like. Not just the Occupy, but the Speak movement. Knowing I live in a dark age. Knowing I live in a dark age before history, I watch my wallet. And am less struck by the gunfights in the avenues than by the newsie with his dirty, pink, chapped face calling a shabby poet back for his change. The crows mobbing the blinking sun-stupid owl. Wolves eating a hamstrung calf hind end first, keeping their meat alive and fresh. These are marks of foresight, beginnings of wit. But Jesus, wearing thorns and sunstroke, beating his life and death into words to break the rods and blunt the axes of Rome. This and like things happened. Knowing that in this advertising rainbow, I live like a trapeze artist with a headache. My poems are no aspirins. They show pale bayonets of grass waving thin on dunes. The paralytic and his lyric secrets. My friend Al, union builder and cynic, hesitating to believe in his own delicate poems, lest he believe in something better than himself. And history, which is yet to begin, will exceed this, exalt this, as a poet erases and rewrites its poem. Okay, so that's what I wanted to open our little discussion here with this afternoon, and we have quite a few people who want to speak.